Right, so today's lecture is about the history for university study. So not necessarily history of everything, because history is far too big, but FOUN 0027, without making any jokes about James Bond in this, history for university study is a foundation course which we have designed to try and help you getting into history and trying to give more interest about the topics overall. The focus for FOUN 0027 is the long 19th century. The reason we've picked 19th century is very much because it is a turning point in history. We will draw your attention to various things that have happened before. As I say, history is huge. So there's lots of things going on as we go through history, but the long 19th century gives us a point of where things start to change. There's very much a sense of things altering quite significantly at this point. Therefore, the topics that we're going to cover, we're going to start in 1789. Now, why 1789? Because people are becoming enlightened. The Enlightenment is important. Enlightened ideas are starting to come through in society, and so much so that in France, the key thing that is so enlightened is that in 1789, the king effectively loses his head. The French Revolution, which I've put in brackets as an S, revolutions, there are a number of them. All the way through the 19th century, there are lots of revolutions. As we go through the whole course, we will look at different aspects of that. But the French Revolution is important. Starting in 1789, we're going to look at how Louis XIV doesn't necessarily do what the rest of society would like. We're going to look at the three estates. So the three estates are the three levels of society. The higher estates are the royalty and the clergy, fairly evenly balanced. And then the third estate is everybody else. Everybody, including doctors and lawyers, all the way through to your labourers and prostitutes, for want of anybody else. There are opportunities for everybody, or not, as the case may be. The French Revolution is an enlightened idea trying to take those concepts through and trying to change the way people are viewing society. By 1848, the rest of Europe has taken on the same ideas. The Enlightenment and the ideas of liberalism and socialism are really coming forward. As we go through this course, 1848 is going to come up a number of times. But a lot of that is predominantly because the changes that are made then. Every time there is a new revolution, a new idea, it's people at the bottom of society who are starting to make those differences, starting to make those changes. But most of the people at the top, the royalty and otherwise, are sending in the army to try and fix things. Doesn't tend to work in 1848. We get a sense of how 1848 is that turning point, the 19th century, right in the middle, where people are looking at things in a different way. The rest of the European societies around are also starting to build empires. Empires are significant. There's a lot of layers to this. Building an empire meant you've got security because you've taken over the lands around you, so they're not going to invade anymore. That helps. Sometimes it is done for money, because if other nations have more money, well, you want to get them on your side. They can be quite useful. And it's also security. It's that security of having those people around you. National unification is something that comes out of this as well, particularly looking at Germany and Italy. The two countries really do get to a point where they're broken up into lots of states early in the 19th century, and by the end of the 19th century, they've become separate countries. They have taken away the ideas of how people could be small, they could be insignificant, and if they group together, unification means that those countries have the power to move forward. Taking a turn after that, there's other aspects of the course that we don't necessarily want to talk about, the assessments and otherwise. But between nationalism and industry, there is an in-class test. So that is challenging you to think about how you understand these ideas, showing your knowledge and really pushing it forward. After the in-class test, we look more thematically at how ideas are developing and how the 19th century has progressed. Industry is a huge point to this. So you can see on the slide that there is that wonderful character, so he's known as Captain Swing, and he is a rebellion against industry, where industry brings in steel and it brings in manufacturing. It brings in lots of facilities for society, but the people who are working on farms suddenly lose their ability to progress in the same way. Poverty also comes out as another theme, another topic around that. Poverty is because where people are making money with industry, brilliant for those people, but the rest of society becomes far more poor. There are people at the bottom of society who are not going to succeed in quite the same fashion. The rest of society starts to realise that there's a royal commission in Britain trying to say how there should be awareness of what is going on, but poverty does not get quite the support it needs. Utilitarianism is key at this point, the idea that it's the best of making the most happiness for the most people. Great idea, except there's no dignity for the poor. They get thrown into workhouses. It puts them out of the way, it solves the problem to a degree, but it means that we don't have the same facilities available. Poverty is significant, it runs all the way through the 19th century. As does the next topic, which is feminism. Feminism is about the women in society. In a male-dominated society, women don't have the same prominence. They're not as noted, and they're certainly not remembered. But we do find that there are enough women making a point and jumping out and making it clear that they are making changes in society, that things are improving, and they have opportunities. New imperialism, then, is another form of empire building, but it's also known as the scramble for Africa. When European nations have peace, they decide they want something more. Clearly, the only way European nations could get more was by invading Africa and taking over their own lands. All of this leads up to the First World War and the origins thereof. We talk about how there are long-term origins, most of the rest of the 19th century, and there are also short-term origins, small things that happen just before the First World War starts out. These elements of society are all combined in this course. It gives us opportunities to understand where things have come from and how they are moving forward. There are fun things as well. So every week we have a lecture, a seminar and a workshop. The workshop, for the most part, looks at primary sources. If you go on to take history in any way, you will find primary sources are important. And this is something we're giving the opportunities for. So with a primary source like this, we've very much got the sense of how world is changing since George Cruikshank, London going out of town, or the March of Bricks and Mortar. Personally, this is actually one of my favourites, because you've got the rainbow of bricks coming out from the city into the countryside. You've got the march of the chimneys heading forward out into the countryside. Meanwhile, you've got a few dead cows, you've got a hay bale looking petrified in the centre there, running away and trying to move out of the way. This again ties in when we're talking about the Industrial Revolution. This is very much an image of industry. It's showing us how industry is moving out and how homes are starting to be created. But equally, it shows us the rebellions and some of the force against it. As we move forward, so if we look at the next slide, we can learn from those resources. The workshops are about debating how these things are working, how things are changing. William Wilde has produced this image of Manchester from Kershaw Moor, and it's a beautiful image. It's a beautiful landscape of people having a picnic on the hills, looking out over all the chimneys and the smoke that are coming off. We do a shared topic through Foundation where everyone teaches about climate change. This is the sort of image that I'm going to be talking about that week. Very much just to finish ideas off and comparing them with the British ideas. It gives us a sense, the modern ideas of how an old landscape shows us one thing and a modern landscape, like the 4th of July image from this year, very much tells us how people are still picnicking and looking at the city. It's an awareness that we are developing and ideas are coming out of it. Thank you very much for listening.